Hey, what is up? What is up? YouTube, boxing family, gaming family, and sports family. It is K right here. I'm back at it with another boxing video commentary for y'all today. Alright, let's get right into it. Huge shout out to everybody that watches the videos, and shout out to Boxing Fight Simulations. Definitely go subscribe to this. Definitely go subscribe to them. And yeah, let's get right into it. I have a pretty good video for y'all today. And yeah, let's get right into it. I'm gonna be giving you guys some boxing commentary for fight, fight week, or basically fight night for this Saturday night with Xander Zayas versus Jaron Ennis. I'm gonna give you guys my final thoughts on this fight. I pretty much talked about it before, but I'm going to say this again. And yeah, let's get right into it. So yeah, man, appreciate you guys, coming through, supporting me. And let's get right into the conversation. So, yeah, pretty much the main thing that I'm going to give you guys like my take on is my final thoughts with the press conference between Xander Zayas and Jaron Boots Ennis. And I want to say all the detractors, especially Boots fans that are coming in to try to give a lot of basically they're trying to like credit Jaron Boots Ennis way too much, and they're trying to like downgrade Xander Zayas in the sense of he's not ready, he's not this, he's not that, but yet Boots is everything without having to, yeah, basically like without having to prove it as much. So yeah, it's gonna be a pretty interesting conversation because I know that I spoke about this at least like a month ago, but I'm going to rehash it like again and just give you guys my actual thoughts. Just to kind of summarize it, the press conference was pretty telling. Um, in the sense of Xander, he's not he doesn't care what Boots has to say to him, and I kind of wish that the press conference had more trash talking involved. I think overall, it kind of felt very like it felt very stale. I think this press conference should have had more trash talking in the sense of Xander should have been a lot more how should I say, he should have been a lot more aggressive to tell Boots that you're not on my level. You just say, basically he just say he says like a lot of crap just to say that he's good, but in reality he's really not good. I think honestly if Xander came in with that attitude to try to be more, I want to say cynical in terms of he needs to make Boots, feel like he's not on his, he's not on his particular level, and basically talk down on him to say no, you didn't work your way up to even get to me. And Xander, like honestly, I think as far as as far as the energy with the final press conference, there wasn't no animosity built in to make this to make this fight far more aggressive between Xander and Boots. And I think if this fight had a lot more veracity in terms of Boots is being more aggressive, trying to talk all crazy and trying to act like he's this, he's that, he's like the next Roy Jones, second coming. It's very disingenuous for somebody to say that, anybody who is favoring Boots should just give him all this almighty credit for him being so great, but he hasn't done anything to even get there. But I think overall with this press conference, something just told me that Xander is very focused in this fight. He's not giving two how should I say, he's not giving two shits about what what Boots is really saying. I think Boots is showing himself to be more of a, I want to say a overhyped person, and he fools himself by thinking that his fans can give him all this credit for him being great without putting in the work. And I think this fight is going to show something tomorrow night where I think there's going to be something that I will probably see more out of Xander than I will out of Boots, because the pressure is on Boots rather than Xander. And I think Xander, he's trying to be given this like Canelo Alvarez, treatment to say, oh, he's too young. He's 23 years old, but yet Boots is 29, which he will be turning 29, which I want to say his birthday is today. So either way, I mean, Boots, he's really old at this point, like in terms of boxing dog years. But Xander, he's already coming into his prime and he has plenty of more experience to be built onto where he's at. So I think overall, Xander needs to come into this fight very disciplined to be defensively responsible. So therefore, Boots doesn't try to like do something dirty to try to like, hurt Xander, to try to do him dirty, to try to like take away his particular longevity, which I just don't think that will probably happen. I think honestly, this is going to be a chess match for who's going to be more consistent. And I think the consistency is going to be revolved around who wants to be more of a patient fighter to set up their shots and be more, defensively technical. And I think, personally with me, when it comes down to this fight, I think Xander Zayas is going to rise to the occasion a lot more compared to Boots, because Boots, he's already had a lot of moments when, like, within his career where he should have fought tougher competition. But the way he's been moving to fight guys that he knows he can beat. And he hasn't been in a position where he can be considered a great fighter, per se, to say, oh, yeah, he's been battle tested. He should beat Xander because of X, Y, and Z, because he fought this guy. And, he's been developing his skills and talents to be where he's at. So I think personally with me, the pressure is going to be on Boots, and I think Xander, he's going to come into this fight guns blazing. I can see, that the focus in Xander, like, he doesn't care what Boots has to say. He doesn't give a damn what Boots is going to do to Xander, because Xander knows that Boots has more pressure behind him, and he keeps talking a lot more throughout this whole build-up because he doesn't have anything else better to say. Granted, you can call me biased, but the truth is like, Xander has shown himself to be very composed throughout the whole, fight camp, build up. Granted, Xander has said, he said some things, like any other fighter should, to take shots at Boots, to say, look at who he's fought and look at how he's been fighting. When Boots tries to deny the claims, to say Xander has said in multiple interviews that Boots is very flat-footed, he gets hit a lot, and he doesn't utilize his technicality very well, which, he was trying to summarize it, but he's saying that there's a lot of exploitation holes that Xander can very well take advantage of. And I think with Boots, he thinks that having to study film on fighters' past fights means that you can't really prepare well for that fighter. And I disagree, because it's like, Boots said in the past that he's never watched Xander Zayas' fights, and he tries to act like as if there's no proper distinction with preparing for a fighter by watching film every day versus a fighter that doesn't watch film, and somehow you could just be ready for some guy that's a dangerous like opponent for you without having to study like what they're good at doing and what they're not good at doing. So I don't really think Boots is really as disciplined compared to what Xander is, because at least with Xander, he's saying that he is studying Boots. He's doing things in terms of, he's putting himself in positions to be prepared for what could be manifested between him and Boots when they fight. So I think personally for me, there's a lot more there's a lot more pressure in terms of how Boots' ring IQ will be tested. And I think Xander, he's going to showcase his ring IQ to be a lot stronger. I think in terms of this fight with the keys to victory, I think Xander needs to start using his jab early. And like as far as Xander saying that he's like the bigger guy, and he's gonna be 10 times more more durable per se compared to Boots. I think when it comes to the size, Xander should still box with Boots, and then if Boots wants to try to be desperate to try to throw power shots, use your body weight to dig more to the body. So therefore, when Boots tries to counter you, you already have something for him to take away a lot of his his early game stamina. So therefore, once Boots does get tired, it will show that he's the one being more reckless. Yeah, he's the one being more reckless. And as Xander takes his shots a lot more sharper to start looking for the shots that are going to hurt Boots, I think that's what Xander needs to do. I don't think Xander needs to be trading with Boots on the inside. I think what Xander is going to do is that Xander is going to utilize his boxing ability very well. And I think, if anything, I would just stab jab to the body early, because what will do, what will happen is that Boots will be very front foot heavy, trying to use his power shots very early, and he's gonna try to use his jab as a trap to try to go for like those power shot counters that Boots is, pretty good at doing. But he does it up against weak, weak competition for him to like be successful. So I think, as far as like the keys to victory, I think Boots just needs to go ahead and just focus on. Well, I think Xander needs to go ahead and focus on the measurements of keeping Boots, in a position where he doesn't get into his particular rhythm, and he needs to constantly frustrate him. Because I think, as people try to like make Xander look like he's not skilled, and they, always like to push this weird narrative to say he's a prospect and all this weird crap. Nah, dude. You are a professional. You come into any sport to become the best. You start out as a rookie and you develop yourself to become a high level veteran. Yeah, a high level veteran level talent. So that's just how I see it. There's no such thing as a prospect. There is such a there is such a thing as, when you start out young in the game, you are a rookie in the game, but you are still a professional, in terms of you are entry level for where you're at, and you are developing to be the best. So it doesn't matter what level that you're at, you are still a professional athlete pushing yourself to be the best. So I think, personally for me, I think the pressure is going to show on Boots, because I think a lot of people don't realize that Xander has a lot more potential, where he hasn't really shown much of his gears as far as like where he's at. And granted, people like to say like, oh, top rank has great matchmaking. He's been pushed to a level where top rank feeds their fighters, like opponents, for them to basically look good. So therefore, but the truth about the matter, from like many critics, including myself, is that top rank matchmaking is a, how should I say, designed to give easy fights to their fighters, and then they'll slowly step up the competition to give them opponents that they know they can beat based off of how well they have progressed as a fighter. So, like, for example, when top ranked fighters try to fight other promotions like PBC or Queensberry promotions or even Matchroom fighters, they put their fighters in positions where they know they can win based off of how they've been moving. And let's just say their longevity has been affected, where they've been, let's just say, knocked out, or they've been in tough fights. They'll put their fighters in positions to win where they know that they can beat that fighter. Or they will put their fighters up against other fighters that they know stylistically this fighter that they're targeting for is a lot weaker. Therefore, they don't possess all the skill and the ability to really beat on their fighter. So, I mean, there's like a multitude of things, but that's just like the gist of like what Top Rank has been known to do. And I think the good thing about Top Rank fighters is that a lot of what the black Afro American talent, or even like, I would say like good Puerto Rican talents that have been built out of Top Rank roster, building, a lot of those fighters are naturally skilled enough to be good in their own right, regardless of who they fight promotionally. And I think when it comes to just like the competition scaling, I think it's on Top Rank's fault, where if they're not gonna give their guys a tough fight, where they say, hey, I want to fight this guy, I want to fight that guy, but then Top Rank's like, oh well, like we have to like wait this out, like we don't want to give you this guy right away. No, if their fighter's saying, hey, I'm like I want to beat this guy up, and I know that I can beat this guy, then I'm sure Top Rank does have like a certain motion put in place where they don't hold back their fighters if their fighters want to be great. So therefore, one, they can get more money, and two, it's good for the promotion because the promotion will benefit a lot stronger to to say, hey, we know how we know how to build our fighters, and our fighters are not afraid of facing all the top tier competition. So I think pretty much, it's a double edged, sword. I was never really like a fan of Top Rank. Obviously, with like Bob Arum having to, control his fighters, with the way that he's been doing it for quite a long time, i.e., Marvin Hagler or even Muhammad Ali, which Top Rank is technically supposed to be Ali's, company, but then Bob Arum tried to use some legal BS to try to, gain, I want to say, company ownership of the business. So that's where Bob Arum, he's controlled Top Rank to the sense where I like maybe this is where, well, maybe to a degree he probably used some form of intellectual property law advantages in order for him to get the company to be registered under his name. And I'm just not too sure like why Muhammad Ali, like, he would do business with Bob Arum if he was probably creating Top Rank at that time frame, and therefore, if it was your company to, if it was Ali's company to begin with, Ali should have separated himself from Bob Arum, and he should have just he should have registered the company under his name. So therefore, Ali can basically make Top Rank Boxing to be his promotion, and therefore we would have like a much different worldview in terms of Muhammad Ali created Top Rank to protect fighters to a degree. So I'm not too sure. I mean, that's just like, that's probably something that I would probably talk about in another video. Like, what if Muhammad Ali were to control Top Rank, and how would Top Rank be if Ali controlled Top Rank and pass it down through his own family? I'll probably talk about that after this, video. But yeah, man, overall, the keys of victory for Xander Zayas is use your jab, use your distance, and if you need to mix it up on the inside, he needs to work boots heavy to the body, and I think he needs to start cracking him with good counter shots to the body. I think Boots is very weak in terms of leaving himself wide open to get hit with good power shots that he doesn't see, and therefore when you do catch him, he can be stunned pretty good to the level of which, if he's fighting reckless, you can get him with you can catch him, with a good shot in order to punish him. So I think Xander, if he focuses on staying on the outside, and if he needs to mix it up on the inside, only go for body shots that are actually, more calculated to basically slow down Boots. And if he does find an opportunity to hurt Boots, to the body, then I would just crack him to the body and basically knock him down. So I pretty much think Xander, he's going to be very disciplined with his jab, and I don't see Xander trying to give Boots any opportunity to try to like walk him down, because Xander, he's very athletically mobile, and for Boots, however, he's very flat-footed. He doesn't really possess all this pizzazz with his footwork to be really good at what he does. Everybody tries to say that he's good, with his switch hitting, but his switch hitting is very sloppy to the degree where he only switches up against opponents that he is stylistically better than. And the truth is like, he's only doing that so well because his level of competition has not tested him enough for him to switch his feet like that. So, for him to be like heavily advanced, for him to scale with the upper echelon competition. So I don't think Boots is really gifted for what he says he can do with his, switch hitting, because if you're a gifted switch hitters should be able to adjust a lot faster against tougher level opposition, and not utilize that up against weaker competition to say you're just good at switch hitting because, look at me beating on lesser guys, but yet, call me Mr. 36-0 and 30 something knockouts because I'm knocking out dudes that are low level. So, I mean, overall, I don't think Boots is really that gifted with his switch hitting because, when you compare that to Marvin Hagler's switch hitting was very good, and he did that up against guys that were very talented and gifted for them to test Marvin Hagler to be good at where he's at right now. So, I mean, Marvin Hagler was really good at what he did, and if you look back at any of his fights, especially the John Mugabe fight, or even Tommy Hearns, like I mean, Marvin Hagler is just really good at what he did, and he really adjusted very well up against tougher styles that have given him the toughest battles. But yeah, overall, I think the strengths for Boots is that Boots is really good at measuring the pressure for him to be really good at what he can do. And I think the truth is that if Boots is able to get the rhythm going for him to utilize his combinations to make Xander feel how should I say uncomfortable, and he's able to offset the rhythm that Xander is able to do to make the pace a lot faster, where Xander's not able to get his shots off a lot quicker, then Boots will only be successful in terms of he has to make this fight very overtly aggressive, and he needs to give Xander literally let let the toughest pressure ever for him to actually win, because I think the boxing ability is going to be tested more on Boots rather than Xander, because I think Xander, once he gets his rhythm going, he can't really be he can't really be stopped, because Xander, he'll figure you out within 1 or 2 rounds, and then once it's game time for him to really show out throughout the whole fight, he's just good at what he's basically he's very good at what he can do in order to make you feel uncomfortable in terms of when he outboxes you and he hits you with good with good shots that are very sharp and very cunning. That's where Xander is really gifted at being very unpredictable with his power. But for Boots, he likes to smother a lot of his shots, therefore making fights very, I want to say, competitive enough to the point where he's only able to win a lot of his exchanges with a lot of low level competition. And his versatility has never been tested up against tougher level opposition. So I mean, it's kind of like Terrence Crawford 2.0 in a way, because if you really do think about it, um, Terrence Crawford is basically the same version with Boots in terms of when Bud was coming up beating on low level guys. A lot of people don't realize that he never really stepped up his competition up until he did win the title up against Ricky Burns. But then what Bud didn't do at 135 is that Bud, he didn't unify his WBO belt, where he could have fought that Miguel dude. I forgot his last name. I think his name was Miguel Fernandez. I forgot. I think his last name was Miguel Torres. I think that's his last name. I could be wrong. Don't try to shun me over that. But yeah, I mean, Bud had many opportunities to fight a lot of top tier guys, where especially with the Miguel guy at 135, who was the IBF world champion at that time, that was with Top Rank. He could have definitely at least been unified before moving up to 140, and then obviously he got undisputed. Congratulations to him. But the truth was is that when Bud went up to 140 to become undisputed, he decided not to clean up the entire division, where he could have at least fought Regis Prograis, he could have fought Adrian Broner, and let's just say he could have fought Sergey Limpinets. At least have some guys on your resume at 140 so you can clean up the division. And I think honestly, now that I think about it, if you become undisputed, you should at least defend your titles to prove that you are undisputed. Because I think, yeah, if you, obviously, yes, if you hit undisputed, yes, you are undisputed as a title holder. but you are not the undisputed champion as a defender to say, I am the undisputed champion, and this is how good that I am because I beat everybody in my division to be, like, to be certified. So I think, that's like another video that I should probably say, like, that I should probably talk about, like, if you hit undisputed in boxing, you should at least defend your titles once, so therefore you can be certified as a champion. But yeah, I think overall, some more keys of victory for Boots is that he needs to start fast. He needs to start giving Xander a lot of looks where he's not able to properly adjust faster. And I think Boots is going to try swinging for the fences because he thinks Xander is going to be this little tiny fighter that's not stronger than him. And he's going to think like Xander's size doesn't matter, and he's just going to go in there and just be super Ultron, yeah, like Ultra Instinct Goku, as if he's like the strongest person on planet Earth. And I don't know, man. Like I think overall, like a lot of his keys of victories are very vulnerable weaknesses that Xander will exploit. And like honestly, like when it comes to boxing, we don't really see much of Boots really box. He's more of just like a come forward pressure fighter that has good educated, inside game to a degree where if he's doing it up against a low level guy, yeah, he's gonna knock him out. But if it's a high level guy, yeah, I think Boots he can get hurt, and I think Boots he can definitely get knocked out, and that's the problem. If Jaron Boots Ennis was moving in his career like an Errol Spence to say, hey, I'm trying to go for all the work to make myself great, and let's just say Boots he ended up fighting all the top tier guys that were available, then yeah, then Boots he would be certified. But yes, I do understand the business of boxing screwed Boots over, so therefore he didn't like the fact that that PBC was obviously holding him back. So I think what Boots should have done, leading up to the Xander Zayas fight, let's just say if this fight was to be manifested in a different timeline, where let's just say if Boots said, okay, screw this, I'm not going to stay at 147, I'm going to move up to 154 and I'm going to go create my path up there. Let's just say he did that. Let's just say Boots ended up fighting Erickson Lubin. He fought Jason Rosario. He could have fought Jared Swift Hurd. He could have fought Arislandi Lara. He could have fought Jermel Charlo. And maybe Canelo. I don't think Canelo probably would have had been there because I think Canelo was already gone by that time. I know Canelo was like around like 2015. So yeah, like like 23 years old Boots. Um, if he moved up to 54, and he had fought at least, yeah, Erickson Lubin, Jason Rosario. Let's just say Jesus Ramos Jr. Or he could fight Jared Swift Hurd, Arislandi Lara, J Rock, Julian Williams, and I mean other guys that were on the come up too. Obviously Sebastian Fondora. Like, yeah, Boots definitely would have been far more tested compared to Xander, and I would say this fight would be far more difficult for Xander than it is for Boots. But the fact that he didn't do that and he put himself in a position to be, more vulnerable. Yeah, like I can't really give credit to Boots to say that he's gonna be better than Xander because he just came up to 154 and he smoked Usima Lima, or AKA Lima Beans. Shout out to BFTV. He gave that name to him, but yeah, like for the nickname, but yeah, I mean, I can't really say Boots is just gonna walk through Xander, like he's like a bag of chips, man, because you can't tell me with a straight face that if you're super skilled in boxing and you waste your prime years fighting bums, and then as you get up to a much older age, like 29, about to be closer to 30, that doesn't prove to me that you're the best fighter in the world. If anything, that just shows to me that you have been hand leveling your competition so you don't lose, and therefore you keep thinking that you're the best in the world, but you're really not good at what you do. So I think Boots has far more vulnerabilities that he doesn't know that he can get exploited for. Versus with Xander, don't you think Xander's already looking at his particular flaws? Because some people like to say Xander, he has like, he has like a stamina problem, but I don't think so. I think Xander has really good, dexterity with his stamina, and the conditioning ends up becoming a lot slower in terms of he's trying to conserve his energy. So therefore, if he sets up a good shot to hurt somebody, he's good at keeping himself at a particular position where he doesn't need to waste his shots, and he's trying to become more accurate with landing the better shots. Because Xander, he's obviously young and he's getting better with where he's going to be. So I think for him being a green fighter, in terms of like what the critics like to say, which I don't think so. I think Xander is very gifted, and he's good at what he can do. And I get it. Like, I understand people have said Xander, he's acted like a diva to a degree, and he hasn't really done anything spectacular as of yet. But I want to say honestly, when it comes down to like the resume, which I'm going to like land my plane to probably finalize this particular point of the video, Xander has fought way better competition compared to Boots. When we're talking about 154, we don't care about 147. 147 is something that Boots was able to manifest in his own path, but he decided to stay at a division that he didn't need to stay at, and he put himself in that position to be very susceptible to where he could have fought better guys, but he decided not to move up and at least create his own path if he wanted to become great. So I think honestly, when it comes to 154, competition scaling, I think Xander Zayas is way stronger. If you look at, Jorge Garcia, or yeah, yeah, Jorge Garcia, and then Abbas Barao, and then you have Patrick Teixeira. And hold on, let me just pause up the video so I can show it to you guys, because I'm gonna keep this very simplistic. All right, hold on. All right, I'm back. So yeah, like we see Xander's box rec right here. So these are his last 5 fights. Xander has fought Abbas Barao, Jorge Garcia Perez, and then we have Slava Spomer, which was Roy Jones' guy's fighter. And then we have Damian Sosa, and we have Patrick Teixeira. So within these 5 fights, we can know that Patrick Teixeira is a good name. He was a former WBO, 154-pound champion that beat Carlos Adames at that time. And then Damian Sosa, not the greatest fighter out of the entire division, but he was a good fighter in terms of he fought Marcus, Valle, and then he just recently beat Frutis Rojas, who was undefeated. And then, this guy, this wasn't really much of like a like opponent, but I mean, yeah, like he hasn't fought like all the best, level competition. But I mean, Marcus Valle was pretty much like the only fight that was pretty good on his particular resume. And then, Frutis Rojas, which is like a good recent victory back in April. So, I mean, overall, Patrick Teixeira is a good name. Jorge Garcia, he beat Charles Bad News Conwell. That was ranked number 2 or number 3 in the division in the WBO. And then Abbas Barao, who beat Yoenis, Telez, which that was a good fight for him. And that was a fight where, Telez, he was supposed to win that fight, and therefore, Abbas came in and he upsetted him. So I mean, Xander has been tested pretty well back to back, at least with Abbas, at least with Jorge. Slava Spomer, this is like a guy where I think Xander, he came into the fight very disciplined, but I think Slava, he was a good fighter in terms of he gave Xander a lot of movement that he had to like cut the ring off and be very, like how should I say, like intelligent with how he was prioritizing his fighting strategy. So I think with Slava fighting the way he fought, he did what he had to do to be successful for, for some portions of the fight, but Xander still, like, he still outclassed him and he still knocked him out. So either way, I think the tougher fights had to be Abbas Barao and Jorge. Those were good fights to give Xander a really tough, battle. Now for Boots, however, let's talk about Boots. His last 5 fights, which this is all from 147, leading up to the Lima fight. We have Usima Lima. We got Lima Beans right there. He's an absolute nobody. Emantas Stanionis, okay, like, this is a guy that wasn't really active too much leading up to the Boots fight, and he got stopped. If anything, yeah, he took like a whole year off leading up to that fight because, if I'm not mistaken, your Dennis Ugas didn't even want to fight him. But I think that was like before them. But he beat Radza Butayev, and then he fought Gabriel Maestre, and I think honestly, he was just basically being sacrificed. He wasn't probably getting enough fights, and therefore Boots beat him at a good time because he wasn't active in his career to make that fight competitive, enough. So I'm gonna put the blame on maybe promotional issues, but I'm also gonna criticize Boots because it's like you fought a guy that wasn't even active like enough. So I think if I was Boots, I would have like told Amantas, hey, I want you to at least be active to get a fight in, and then after that, after that, you fight me. So therefore, it can be like a fair fight. So I mean, from that point on, he fought Karen from 2024 of last year, which was very garbage. That was like the rematch with him and Karen. He got exposed really bad in the second, in the second fight. I say both fights honestly, but yeah, we got, Lima Beans, we got Amanta Stanionis, we got Karen, we got David Avanesian, and we got Royman. Yeah, we got Royman Villa. Honestly, these fights are terrible. I think Amanta Stanionis is like the only quote unquote top guy that Boots beat. But it's like when you look at like basically the level of a competition, like Royman Villa is not a guy that fought anybody good except for Speedy Rashidi Ellis, and he hasn't fought nobody. I mean, like, he hasn't fought nobody good leading up to Jaron Ennis. I mean, yeah, Janelson Figueroa Boca Chica, that was a good decent level victory. He hasn't done anything in his career. I don't know what the hell he's been doing. He should have actually won that fight up against Royman, but surprisingly, Royman Villa just ends up beating him. And then, more so, Janelson, he just wasn't disciplined. I can just tell because it's like, if he was disciplined, he definitely would have beat him. But I do remember him getting his ass beat because Royman, he came into that fight and he knocked him down, and he just beat him up, the whole fight. So I mean, yeah, Boots' competition is clearly proven to be a lot weaker, and he's been more exposed by his lesser opposition contemporaries versus him facing any high level contemporaries to be considered a great fighter. So I mean, Xander Zayas is pretty much his toughest fight, to date, because it's like, if you really think about it, there's nothing better that Boots does in terms of his competition to beat any of Xander's last 5 opponents, because I would never say Abbas Barao would get smoked by Usima Lima. No, like, Abbas Barao and Jorge Garcia would basically smoke Usima Lima. So yeah, that's pretty much my take on that. And yeah, I mean, furthermore, I mean, this is just like a fight that I don't think is really going to be as, it's not going to be one-sided that many people try to make it out to be. I think Boots is going to be in a world of trouble if Xander ends up figuring out his style, but he also fights very smart, and he starts to analyze and starts to decipher Boots's framework. So I think for Xander, he's gonna have a lot more elevation to where he's at, and I think that's something where he needs to put himself in a position to be successful, where he's not giving Boots any opportunity to get a faster rhythm for him to like try to pressure Xander all night long, because I think that's what Boots is gonna do. I don't see him fighting off of his back foot. I don't see all this flashy boxing, that Boots is gonna do. I think Xander is going to show his world championship level experience to be who he is as a fighter. So I think Boots is going to do that too if he manages to show something that I don't see. But either way, I think more so Xander has, he has like a lot to gain from this, and I think this will just show where the levels will be. And I mean, even if like just to kind of like make everything very fair and simplistic, let's just say if Boots wins, if Xander ends up getting cooked, and let's just say, furthermore, if Xander was coming into this fight very nonchalant and he wasn't taking Boots very seriously, or even if he was, but he just wasn't putting himself in a position where he should have been a little bit more stricter with how he was coming into the fight, but then he just gets smoked because Boots caught him with like a good shot and he knocked him out early. Does that make Xander Zayas a trash fighter? No, it doesn't. But the truth is that Jaron Boots Ennis is only good for what he was able to show with a good shot that gave him the easy way out for him to get that particular victory if he were to win by knockout. Now, if it was just like a wash, like a 12-0 decision wash, then I would just say, yeah, Xander is a very great fighter, but he got bested by another great fighter like Boots, which I'm going to give him credit, but Xander, he's going to accomplish more in higher weight classes. Because if he says that, hey, his body is coming to a point where he's not able to make 154, or let's just say if he's still able to make 154 before he moves up to 160 and other weight classes, past it, like 168, 175, then all credit to him, because Xander, he has plenty of years left for him to do whatever he wants to do to be successful. Now, for Boots, however, he has a lot more pressure if he were to get the victory. Because if he were to win, don't you think Sebastian Fundora and Devin Haney are going to be knocking on his door? They're going to be eyeing Jaron Boots at us, because Boots is now going to say, nah, man, I want to become undisputed in this, in this particular weight class. And just to like let you guys know, like, Boots said in the past he wants to become a 4 division undisputed world champion. So that's his goal as of yet. But let's just say if he were able to get undisputed at 154, and then let's just say if 160 was to be unified to become undisputed, up there, Boots can move up to 160, and he can easily get a one shot, like a one shot title to, let's just say, like, I don't know, let's just say Arislandi Lara, he becomes, undisputed. That would be good too, because if Boots were to become back to back undisputed and he was able to just do all that, like the way he says he's going to do it, then credit to him, because Boots is actually putting in the work. Now, the issue is, however, is that you are doing this far late into your end prime, and now you have more vulnerabilities where your opponents can see you become more vulnerable for you to get beat up more. Because now that you are being older, you will now have more longevity damage to your career. Now that's the problem that Boots doesn't understand. Time is not on your side, but you need to make these fights now, because usually the end year for boxers to end up hanging it up in boxing is about 33 years old. Some fighters can go past that to, let's just say, 36 or maybe close to 40. Usually it's like 37 or 38 years old. But boxing is like a dog year sport. You have to like get your years in now being young, and you cannot be staying out of the ring for that long. Because what ends up happening is that other fighters that are more hungry and more dangerous than you are going to beat you up a lot more. Therefore, you're going to be far more susceptible to a lot more younger guys that could possibly, that could possibly beat you, and they're more dangerous than you from a stylistic standpoint. So, ideally speaking, for Boots, he has a lot more pressure on him, and he has to put himself in a position where he is not holding himself back more. Now, that's just if he wins. It's not a guarantee that Boots can win tomorrow. I don't think so. I think, for me personally, my pick is Xander. I think Xander is going to be the better. Yeah, I think he's going to be the better technical fighter. And I think he's going to display something that we haven't seen before. And I would think that Xander's going to put himself in a position where he's going to do the best he can do, but he's not going to put himself in positions where he's going to be more susceptible late game. I think Javier Centeno is a very great coach, and I think, compared to Boots' father as a coach, Boots listens to his dad whenever he wants to, and I think him and his father both fail themselves, as a team, where they just think about wanting to impress the fans, and then they try to get enamored off of trying to go for knockouts rather than technicality, and trying to go for a actual clean unanimous decision victory. But yeah, my final thoughts is that if Xander were to win, I think this would be the greatest victory of Xander Zayas' career. I think everything that Xander has worked hard for ever since he came into the game at 16 years old to sign with Top Rank, and then I think he debuted at 17. So it's like, for him to be where he's at right now, to be 6 years pro heading into the game, from 17 years old. I want to say from 17 years old heading into 23. That's really huge. It's huge to see that Xander Zayas has progressed really well, and he's a very great talent. He's a good fighter in terms of he has solidified his style to be where he's at, and he's not trying to say, oh, nobody, nobody can't mess with me. These guys are not on my level. No, Xander is coming into the sport to improve and to be the best, win, lose, or draw. And I have to respect the fact that Xander is not saying, oh, I need to protect my O. No, Xander is saying he wants to be a legacy fighter, and he wants to write something down for him to be looked back at. So I think something like this, for Xander to take a fight like this, that is a high level risk. I think Xander, he's just gonna shine, because it's like, I think Xander shines a lot harder up against tougher level matchups. And I mean, we've seen it with Abbas, we've seen it with Jorge, and I think with Boots, that's just gonna shine more. So I respect Xander a lot, and I have to say, a lot of people that are talking shit about Xander, especially on social media, trying to say he can't do this, he can't do that. Who the fuck are you guys, bro? You guys have no respect for Puerto Rican fighters that actually want to be great. And granted, I don't make anything into a particular race issue, but I will say, anytime when it's having to be, a fight between like an Afro-American fighter or a Puerto Rican fighter, or vice versa, let's just say it's like some other fighter from Europe going up against, let's just say some other fighter that's either Mexican or Puerto Rican or Nicaraguan, and they don't they're not white, or they're like brown skin. It's always like some weird bias that people have for their fighters. So I don't know why that is to be the case. I think it's like pure idiocy, and I think it's pure bias, like based off of like the character enamoration of having to support guys that they support because they just like them as a person. They don't like them as a fighter. They're man fans, and they're not really true boxing fans. So yeah, that's my take, man. My final prediction for this fight is I got Xander by unanimous decision or split decision. I think Boots is going to try to make this fight competitive. I think Boots, if he gets exposed heading into the middle to later rounds, it's game over. I think Xander is going to do what he does best and be the fighter that he's going to be. to showcase his prime, and I think it's going to show on Fight Night that Xander Zayas is who he is as a fighter, and he's just going to keep getting bigger and stronger. So I think everything with his durability and the size and the technicality, he's going to do whatever he needs to do. So, I mean, credit to Xander. He's good at what he does, and I think overall, man, like I'm happy for him. Like I'm happy that he took on a good challenge when he didn't need to take on Boots. He could have easily fought Brandon Adams, that was like ranked top 3 in the WBO. So it's like for him to do everything at this particular level, to say that he wants Boots, he wants to take him out and basically beat him up. Like I'm all fine for that, man. Congratulations. So yeah, I think honestly, I would like to see Xander move up to 160. I don't know how he's gonna look on the weigh-ins, for today. But if he does end up doing good for the weigh-ins and he's able to still make 154 heading into the future, then by all means, I like to see Xander continue, win, lose, or draw after, Saturday. So, yeah, let me know what y'all think, and that's pretty much it. It's going to be a great night. Puerto Rican fans are going to be basically representing, and Philadelphia fans, I think I think they will be there, but I don't I don't really think they're going to be in massive droves. I think yes, Boots is going to have a pretty good decent crowd, but I think Puerto Rico is going to be taking that taking that fan base over. But yeah, that's pretty much it, and I will see you guys later, and peace. And huge big shout out to Xander Zayas, and shout out to Boots too. So it's going to be a great night, man. So all right, I'll see you guys, and peace. All right. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.